We're talking about who could be the next chairperson because it was time to rotate. And we went through the names of possibilities and we decided on Ken. We thought that might be a hard sell, because he was not a person who had taken personal leadership. He was just always there doing a good job in his classroom on Victorian poetry. So we decided maybe he'd be a good chair. We wanted to give him a whirl at it. We put his name in. He was chosen, or we voted for him. I can't remember exactly what the process was at that moment, but he was a wonderful chairperson. Always there in support of the faculty first, and always holding up standards, which we were proud to go by his rules, because he wanted this college to teach students to read and to think and to write. And we were on his side. He was on our side too.
Jim Nagel, who was in the liberal arts, was pushing to get the teachers sort of organized. And Morris' daughter by that time, I guess, had become department chairman. So they formed a faculty council, it was called. And just local bunch. And they finally talked me into being president of it. And so I got in on trying to put a contract together. And I worked with Ms. Miller on this contract. I'd go in and show it to her, and we put in hours and hours and hours of things, just trying to develop. And so she just wanted me to come in and present it to the board. I did. I know I was scared to death and probably stammered and stuttered and wondered if I even had a job when I was all over. And after all that, she pulled out this contract from under her desk or on her desk and said, "Now here's my contract." Well, they never even paid 10 cards after all that. So I went back to the group and said, "This isn't working, you know." And so they said, "Well, we're going to have to get some outside help in." So we had a forum over here in one of the old buildings and had Association of University Professors, the NEA. Seemed like there was another 3 representatives come in. And I got up to introduce them, and who was sitting right in the middle of the front row? Mary Miller. And she always was a little colder to me after that. Being a farmer, I'm not a big union man, but I could see the faculty didn't have much say. And I think after that it worked better. I mean, we were still not strong union. Yeah, I don't think so. Big pusher, but so that was an interesting time too.
You know, I think it was very odd, because all of these career and tech programs for the longest time were considered terminal programs. You get your 2-year associate degree and you go to work. And you know, Blackie just had a connection with ISU, and I'm not sure if he went to ISU. I know before he came here, he was at Vincennes, so he must have had a connection somehow. And yeah, I knew Jerry Cockrell. I remember going with Blackie down to Indiana State and visiting Jerry and talking about, "Hey, we've got these 3 kids. We think you ought to take them." And you know, it was almost sort of hand-picked. These are the best students, and you should go get your degree. And that just didn't happen a lot. And it happens a lot more now than it did then, because a lot of the colleges figured out, hey, these are good students. They've done 2 years. They're mature. They know how to study. They're going to work hard. They've got a goal. But back in the time when Blackie started that, it was really unheard of. And he just had that connection.
Some of them, I think, were here to build a stepping stone for a next career, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. I mean, while they were here, I think they had good intentions, but they didn't plan on being here forever. Of course, Joe changed the name from Junior College to Community College. So they were supportive. He was, and I think each one was supportive within the limits of what they had to work with. You know, finances were still are, I'm sure. I knew each one of them, some better. Ron Lingle had been in Vietnam, so we had common interests. I knew Bill Angus. Of course, he was only president for a couple of years, and then he passed on. He was so worried in those days about us becoming Parkland East. That's all I could hear from him was, I'm sure we're going to. See, they were still doing the redistricting stuff too. Down the big fight for a couple, 3 years when I got here was the area down around Paris. They called it the Donut, and they weren't sure who was going to pick up that area. Well, they ended up going over to Lakeland now, I guess. But there was a lot of politicking going on. I think we went down there and put on some classes and stuff, trying to draw them in. But well, it's sort of interesting you asked that, because when I was looking through my list of people, those male presidents in the middle there didn't have as much impact on my memory anyway as the two ladies on each end.
These were Iranians who had to get out of the country, and after the change of leadership there, that to be friendly to the U.S. was not going to work anymore. So if they could get to this country, they did, and a lot of them needed education, of course, and were prompted to come over here because the schools were open. And I don't know who the first one was that came in, but he opened a crack, and then the door seemed to be wide open, and Mary Miller had an assistant, Annabelle Neal, who took these refugees, that's almost what they were, under her wing, and she helped them find places to live. She helped them, I think she probably loaned them money when they were broke. She went to their homes. She invited them to her home. She was the champion of these students. And many years later, after they were graduated and gone, Jan Cornelius and I were in her home in Florida when she retired, after Mary Miller retired and died. And then Annabelle went to Florida because she was Mary Miller's better angel, always taking care of her and anticipating and doing things for her, and her friend as well. Anyway, she retired to Florida, and Jan and I went to visit her, and while we were there, an Iranian student who had been one of her proteges called her to wish her happy birthday. This was years later, so she had a lasting effect on, an enabling effect on a lot of students in their education in this country when they were expats from home. I was not aware of any women who came in that group, and they didn't come as a group, of course, but the word got out that our doors were open if they could find the support for the tuition. They could come here, and I actually taught a class in rhetoric to non-English native speakers, and I learned a lot in that class.
It was a nice honor. I always said I didn't even consider myself the best teacher in the department, let alone the country. But it was a nice thing for DACC, especially when we got it 4 times in a row. I've talked to teachers from other colleges, and they were quite impressed that we'd pulled that off. I was sitting at my desk in my office when Dr. Jacobs called and said, "Are you sitting down?" And she told me about this. And of course, I, being a smart aleck, said, "Well, you know, if I was a baseball player, I'd get quite a pay raise here." And she said, "Well, you're probably going to get a free meal out of it." But it was really nice. Of course, there have been 4 of us. Hoagland and bowling. Kathy Sturgeon's moved over a half mile down my road, and myself. And of course, Lori and I still run around, so we're all aware of each other. But to go to a big national convention hundreds of people out there. And see DAC's picture of the campus up on the wall. It was really, you know, I got to introduce the president and the board members that were there, which were most of them. And I went to all 4 of the presentations. It was an awfully nice award for DACC.
Dr. Jacobs, you know, when she came here, she was really very bothered that Lakeland was delivering classes in her district, because Lakeland was running the academic programs at the Danville Correctional Center. We originally started it. We had the programs. I remember traveling around the state, would have been Dr. Brown, looking at different programs and seeing, did we want to do it? So we finally said yes, we would do it. And then Dr. Brown didn't like some of the things that were going on, so and that's why it went away, because Dr. Brown made the decision we weren't going to do correctional education. So when Dr. Jacobs came, it was like, we're going to get back into that program. And anytime there was an RFP to take over a prison program in the state of Illinois, she was on it. So we got Henry Hill and, you know, in Galesburg, and then we got one up in East Moline. And the whole goal all along was to horse trade them back to get Danville, and that took about 3 years. But the reason it ended up in tech was that most of those programs were career technical oriented. So yeah, why not give it to Bruce? Because he's got electronics, he's got computers, he's got, you know, I didn't have custodial, but it's a similar kind of thing. And that was really, that was a lot of fun too. Remember the very first time I went to prison, it's like, really? I gotta go in here and that door clanks behind you and you think, and they put this little thing on your hand, and just like you don't want to rub that, because you think if that little mark goes away, they won't let you back out, and you get to stay there forever, you know. But after the first couple times, it got to be, it wasn't a big deal, and so those were interesting times, because we did a lot of road trips. Dr. Jacobs and Becky Schlecht and I would load up, and we'd drive to East Moline, or we'd drive to Henry Hill, and those were fun times just to talk and get to know people better about what they're doing. And also, you know, prison education, I think, is really, really important. It helps a lot. It gives those guys and gals, we didn't have any gals, but a good leg up on maybe getting out and staying out. When we got Danville, it was, you know, there was a great director at the time. She was really, really sharp, and she had worked for Lakeland, so we sort of kept her aboard. She did a really, really good job. And then again, it was one of those things that for a while, the state wasn't sending us any money, and we were just sort of footing the bill. Finally, we got a budget and things improved. But I don't know how much longer we would have stayed in the prison business had the money not started back out, because it's money that could be used for on-campus programs.
Tell you how the desert trip developed. Probably 71, 72, I got this flyer from Southern Illinois University about a summer course where they'd start out over on the southeast corner of the United States studying the pine forests and swamps or whatever of that. They come across the United States, they went to Rocky Mountains in Colorado, down the southwestern desert, and then to California along the coast. I said, we ought to go on that. And so we signed up for it. And things came up with the farm, I don't remember what all, and I had to bow out, and Kurt went. And that's where the idea of the desert trip started, was with that. He said, well, we can do something like that for a couple of weeks of spring. And so the design of that, I have to give credit to Kurt for a lot of that. We all got involved in making it go. The primary people there were Ron Caldwell for the physical science, myself, and for the science, the biology of the animals and that kind of stuff, Kurt for botany and stuff, and Barb Todd, who had the toughest job of us all. They got credit for camping and hiking and cooking and that kind of stuff. It was a PE credit. I think it was 4 science and maybe it was 3 science and 1 PE credit. And Barb would be up the last one at night, getting everything ready for the next morning. First one up with coffee at God only hours on that thing, because we camped out all but 1 or 2 nights of that 2 weeks, and slept on the rocks, because places there wasn't anything but rocks. But Barb, Kurt, and Ron and I think I went 20-some times, 22, 23 times out of 25. I remember Kurt said one time, he said, well, you realize, and he was talking about Ron Caldwell and I and Barb Todd and some, have spent more of our life together than any other group of people in our lives.
Well, the book that I'm most proud of was a book I wrote in collaboration with Jan Cornelius. That's a book of history of women in Danville, and how at the turn of the previous century they were coming out of their homes and into the public life. There was the traditional woman, and she was changing into a new active public figure. That book is called Women of Conscience, and how women in this community facilitated their entrance into public life by helping other people, or first working in their churches, and then in clubs and organizations, and then professionally. And that is a book that you don't see at Barnes & Noble. It's on the shelf in the university libraries. Jan was already a published author, and she invited me in on that her last project, and I was honored to be her partner in that research. It was very, very fulfilling. But the book you were asking about in the first place was a collection of anecdotes, stories that I put together and had planned to publish just locally here with well, that's all that ever happened. It was published locally, but my version of it was to be just a little paperback that we did with the print shop here in campus. The library, once it came out, the library was kind enough to have hardbound copies made and gave me one, and just to protect the stories that are here, which are just stories that I went around campus and had lunch with the ag department. I had lunch with the science department. I had lunch with the math people, and just had them tell me stories, like I'm telling you stories right now. Mm-hmm. They told me stories, and I put them together in a book, and I called it Second Chance because Miss Miller had written a book once she retired called A Chance for All. And I wanted this to be a follow-up, but it's very different. Miss Miller, her plan in her book is to go chronologically from the beginning up to the establishment of the campus. And kudos to her, not only for making that happen, but for recording it very well in this book. So I was just modeling after her in terms of the title, A Second Chance, but I focused my organization on the personalities and stories that would feature their personalities. I could tell the story about Bob Bonnewell's convertible that had a nude mannequin, top down, and a nude mannequin in the back seat in the faculty parking lot when North Central came to evaluate the college that first time. And when the president, Ron Lingle, came back from lunch with these big important evaluators, he saw that and tried not to notice, but of course they said, "What in the world is that over there?" And he said, "Oh, that's just the liberal arts faculty." It wasn't liberal arts, so it was actually Bob Bonnewell's car, so he must have been in on it. He had a great car.
Looking back to say what I'm most proud of, I could probably tell you I'm proud of some of the programs we started, like WIND and HIMSS and the medical assistant program. And those are just things. I think the thing I'm most proud of is that in the 40 years I was able to hire some really great people and have seen those people really turn into excellent instructors. That's probably the thing that was the most satisfying, to bring someone in to run a program, and then they run the program and they turn it into a great program. Like Kathy Franklin took IT, which was basically almost non-existent, and has turned it into one of the best programs in the college. And you know, having these people come that really weren't teachers, but have learned how to become really good teachers, that's the thing I think that I'm the most proud of. And you know, we've made some bad decisions. We've struck out on a few people. Whether that, you know, that's just life. Yeah. Things that I would like to see different or better, I don't even know what it would be, because geez, the facilities are outstanding. We just keep buying new buildings and renovating buildings, and I guess the thing that would be, if you could have a magic ball, is that you could fully enroll all your programs, figure out a way to get enrollment for all your programs, because that was the one stressor to me, looking at low enrollment programs and how do we build those programs up, and what happens when you have to cut them. And I had to cut a few programs, and when you tell people they don't have a job anymore, that's not fun. So crystal ball, figure out a way to get more people in all the programs and keep all the programs being viable. That would be what I would like to, and I don't know the answer to that. I didn't figure it out in 40 years.
About 2 weeks, spring break, and they were out the Monday after spring break. We would leave like on a Wednesday or Thursday before the spring break and get back a day or two after school started. So we were missing a little bit of class on each end. Started out, DACC didn't have any vans. So Kurt had a van and we rented one. And that was before the days of cell phones. So we got a hold of some CB things that the semi people were using, and tried to use those, which worked pretty well, I guess. We made a little trailer that we could fold out the sides and cook on. They were limited to one barracks bag and something to their roll for their sleeping bag. And it was always 16 students and 4 instructors, I guess, was the limit. And I still have people today say that was the most memorable experience I'd had in college, was that 2 weeks, because it was intense. They had to write term papers, they had to take tests, they had to take quizzes while out there. Learned a lot. We picked that environment, the desert, because it was something we could figure the weather wouldn't be too bad in the springtime.
She was just simply a lady. She was brilliant. She was open-minded. She was indefatigable with travel. She loved to travel. And we went places. We went to Europe twice. We went to Alaska. This was with groups she organized groups of students frequently, and she would put it into a class form on the curriculum so she could give history credit. If we were going to travel through France, we would do a little history of France before we go, and we'd come back and write a paper, and we'd get 3 hours credit. So we had lots of good trips that I got in on that way. She was also a farmer's wife. She did it all. She had 4 children. She cooked meals for this time of year when her husband and sons and hired people were in the fields harvesting. She took care of their meals. She was just trusted and much admired.
About 1990, we'd moved over here, and we were determined we were going to get cadavers. U of I loaned us some, and when we went over, who was in charge of giving us the cadavers? Lori Garrett. And that's where Kurt met her, and so one summer he needed a teacher and contacted her, and she started teaching, and that's how she got into this operation. But I went with Kurt and probably Lori, I don't know, to Chicago to get the bodies many times. And early on, it was the most morbid thing I ever went to. They had these pits up there. This was at the med school at UI. and they had these bodies down those pits with a rope tied on their leg, and you'd pull them up and see if you wanted this body or not. And I tell the kids, I said, don't ever get a rose tattoo on your butt, because I know what it looks like when you're 80 years old, and it's not that pretty. But anyway, oh, and I felt so sorry because I know there were med students working there, and they would be going around in their knee boots because the formaldehyde and stuff was coming out of those pits when they dragged those bodies out. And we went through and we'd pick what we were after. Well, fortunately, the anatomical donations, whatever it's called, group got a new facility with, it looks more like the thing you'd expect with the cases where you pull them out and all that. But the cute stories, when we'd go up to pick up a body, and a lot of times DACC would give us a little pickup truck to go get it. And we'd take a van with students, because students, the anatomy students, some of them wanted to see this. They were, I don't know if they thought they were going to get in, or they were going to med school. Good thing. And we'd put the body in the back of that pickup truck, and we'd stop at a real nice restaurant not too far from the be in the back of the truck while we're in Eden. And you just wonder what's going to happen, but it was all wrapped and covered, and never had any incidents there. But one time we were coming back Highway 1 up here, and the pickup truck, Lori and I were in the truck, Kurt was in the van with the students and had the paperwork. We ran out of gas. So we're sitting up there on the road with this body in the back with no paperwork. And Kurt turned around because he realized something had happened, came back, and went and got his gas. But we often talked what had happened if a cop had come along. So we've had amazing incidences over the years with things around here.
I would say, of course, the financial issue is always a big sell because the price is right here. I would say if the faculty is anything like it was when I was here, you're in for a good solid beginning gen ed accomplishment in your education. Go to DACC, you'll have teachers you can talk to, relate to, come back to, and sometimes even make friends with. Just remember, this was a safe place to work. It was an inspirational place to work, really. Meeting great people in the faculty and making friends, future friends among the students, and worked well with the presidents. I had a good career here. I would recommend it to the other instructors, and I always recommend it to students.
I would definitely tell a student to come to DACC because, number one, you're going to have real full-time professional teachers who 99.9 are going to care mostly about you and your success. Your class sizes are going to be pretty small. You're going to have, for the most part, really good state-of-the-art equipment. You're going to have great facilities to learn in. And it's really pretty inexpensive given what you're going to pay to go to a major four-year school. And the other thing I think is important about community college education and why I would tell students to come, if you're really not sure what you want to do, I think a lot of students are going to college because mom and dad said you will, don't really know what. You can explore. You can say, well, maybe I want to do computers. Well, maybe after a semester, computers are just not going to do it. You can do something else. And if you start out with some gen eds, you can apply those across the board. So it's a time for really exploration for what you want to do, and it's not going to cost you, mom or dad, or the taxpayers a lot of money.
I'm proud of the way this place grew and developed. You know, I always talked about, think of all the changes my mom saw in her lifetime, from horse and buggy to flying all over the country in a jet airplane to see her grandkids. I saw the same thing here. My first few years, our way of reproducing things was with an old mimeograph machine. You had to type up a stencil, put it in this ink drum, And that was done in one little room over there was a restroom by Mary Miller's office. And so you'd have to come in on Saturdays or Sundays to do your stuff. So to think of what we did to PowerPoints and all this stuff in my lifetime here. I remember Dave Kitzman said something about, can you believe it, Hoagland's even doing PowerPoints now? It was a struggle. Mine were not very pretty. I think that's why I was so impressed with Wendy Brown. Came here when we were on hiring. God, she had butterflies flying through it, bees, bombs. My poor Zoe students that just had the basics. You know, I'd have a picture occasionally. But so just what I'm most proud of is just being a part of seeing this really wonderful change. And I know they were probably just blowing at me, but I've had many students come back and say, we think we got just as good an education here. We know we got a lot more attention. Any one memory? I don't know. I've got a lot of memories apparently, if I think back. But personally, the wonderful people, students and staff that I got to work with, very privileged. But just see this place grow like it did. And I hope it'll continue to do. I'm sure it will.